Hello, everyone. We are rolling for another episode of the JJF1 podcast, where Jonah and Jordan talk about all things related to F1. Today, we are going to talk about the 2021 Spanish Grand Prix. I know that there's probably another title sponsor, but you know that more than I do, Jordan. Uh, where Lewis Hamilton won from pole, from his 100th pole in his career, his 98th victory. From Max Verstappen in second and Valtteri Bottas in third. So, Jordan, in terms of Spanish Grand Prix, we got a pretty interesting race. I did not expect it to be that interesting. How are you feeling? And most importantly, we were texting throughout the entire weekend saying this is going to be Valtteri Bottas's time to win, and it didn't happen at all. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I thought that this was going to be one of the more boring races on the calendar, but I was pleasantly surprised this weekend with qualifying and with the race. We hear a lot about this track, Barcelona, Catalunya, how it's really difficult to overtake. There are no hard braking zones, and that's the reputation that it typically gets. However, this year we saw some overtaking, but the emphasis was more on this tire strategy and how the teams had to maneuver that, which made the race super interesting and made for a very interesting final 10 laps.
I have to agree with you on that. I think that if there was a relatively new F1 fan that wanted to see how important strategy really is in a race, especially for tires, this is definitely the race to look at. Um, because you could easily see the difference between Hamilton and Verstappen on a one-stop strategy versus a two-stop strategy. And in the end, you had the probably the best driver of all time managed to climb 22 seconds in like 15 laps. So
Yeah.
that was what happened. With that being said, we're gonna dive straight into it. Jordan, what was your most we're gonna do best overtake first. What was your best overtake
Yeah, so
that you've
for the
seen?
first time listeners, the way Jonah and I do our race reviews is we structure it kind of differently compared to other uh, F1 commentators. We do kind of like a different segment. So we talk about our best overtake, our most surprising moment, our most entertaining moment, and our most dramatic moment. Now I'll start off with my best overtake, and I'm actually looking forward to hearing yours because mine is an overtake that some people caught. It was at the first lap of the race, but it wasn't the front row of the grid. It was actually the second row of the grid, and I was very happy to see Charles Leclerc go round the outside on Valtteri Bottas. Now, for those who don't know, I'm a fan of Valtteri Bottas. I really want to see him win. I want to see him succeed. But it was great to see a car in the top three that was not a Mercedes. And it kind of gave me a lot of Alex Albon vibes seeing him go around the outside. And he caught him napping. He really caught him sleeping at the end of the race in the posters interview. Valtteri said, he didn't see him there. He didn't look to his left, didn't see him there. And he caught him napping. And I think that just shows how much Charles Leclerc is able to push that Ferrari car to its limit and how talented he is of a driver. And I was very impressed with that overtake. The first lap, there's a lot of talk before the race about this first lap. The first couple of turns are supposed to be very intense in Barcelona. It's the make or break of the race, and that is where Charles Leclerc made his race.
Yeah, honestly, he should have finished on the podium. Uh, but their Mercedes strategy was just incredible this race. And when you have even if you have the fastest car with a perfect strategy, you could still manage to finish 1-3. Um, I I'm happy that you talked about that because yeah, exactly. He should have been on the podium. Charles should have been on the podium, and I'm gonna talk more about Valtteri later.
Yeah,
But
but I want to hear your overtake. Which overtake are you highlighting for this
my
weekend?
my favorite overtake is more for sentimental reasons because it didn't end up sticking in the end. But it was when there was a 2-lap battle between Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso to move into 10th spot. And on the first of those laps, Fernando knocked Stroll aside into the escape route. And at that point, we thought there's no way that he's going to end up catching up again. His race, he's going to be stuck in P11. And then the next lap around the outside, like you said, Stroll managed to pass a 2-time world champion, Fernando Alonso. And I think for a lot of sentimental reasons, that stuck with me because it showed that even in a relatively uncompetitive Aston Martin car compared to last year, he could make it work and pass people throughout the midfield, just to add on his ability to pass it throughout the season. I say that it didn't stick because the lap after that he ended up getting passed by Gasly, but I'm happy that he ended up making that overtake because it showed that he's not afraid to make any big moves.
Yes, I actually really like that you highlighted that, especially because there was a four-car battle at that point where everyone except for the lead car, who was in 10th place, who I think was Alonso, had DRS enabled, had their rear wings open at DRS on the main straight. And that was very intense to watch. And at the end of that four-car battle, unfortunately, Gasly um, came out the winner. He came out in P10, but it was just crazy racing, and that's why we watch F1. And because Barcelona is not a track that's known for overtaking, so when we're treated to some overtaking, especially by our Canadian boy, we're so happy about it. It's a treat for us. It's like a Christmas in July.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you kind of spoiled it for me. That was going to be my most entertaining moment
Yeah.
is talking about that four car battle between Alonso, Vettel, Stroll, and Gasly for 10th place, which, by the way, is only worth one world championship point.
Yeah, the
But
fastest lap gets as many points.
exactly. So uh just to have all four of them fight it out, it was as if they were going four wide at some points, where the battle was very intense for the point that all four of them were within DRS range. And just coming out of the last chicane, which shouldn't exist, but anyways, the last chicane before the pit straight, and seeing everyone attempt to dive around the other, or Stroll defending from Gasly at one point, and then Vettel trying to hold off, and then Alonso holding for his life. Uh, I that was my most entertaining moment, just to see a bunch of young up and comers against two multiple time world champions fight it out for 1 point, which for the world champions is pretty sad because
Yeah, and there was a lot of emphasis played out on that battle in the broadcast. There was a lot, a lot going on with Hamilton trying to catch up. I don't know if at that point he already caught up, but there was a lot going on, and they played a lot of emphasis on that world championship point. That's just as much as the fastest lap of the race,
yeah.
and that was very entertaining. They kept me on the edge of my seat, which is really not something you get to say after a Spanish Grand Prix often.
Yeah, exactly. But now that we kind of went into my most entertaining moment, what was yours?
So I actually had, so I really enjoyed the racing, and I knew you were going to talk about something very race related, which is why I chose something not so race related that had me chuckling, had me laughing. It was the Antonio Giovinazzi pit stop, where there
Oh
was a
no.
punctured tire, and to me, I was like, wow, how? And we know that Alfa Romeo has no effect on the race. We know that Alfa Romeo is not really a competitive team. They're in the bottom three. But to me, that was just very fun to watch. Pit stop shenanigans in general, especially that pit stop. And the other pit stop with Verstappen, where the back left tire, I believe, took a while to get on because the pit stop
Yeah.
was so last minute. pit stop shenanigans to me were the most entertaining part of the race because, as we saw, a delay of 1 or 2 seconds can make the world of a difference.
Yeah.
And to me, the uncertainty following the pit stops themselves is what kept me engaged, is what kept me really happy watching the race. And to me, that was very entertaining.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. The pit stops were I've never in most recent memory I haven't seen pit stops make that much of a difference in a race, especially when I mean secure, but also um normal pit stops, not slow pit stops. I mean, I was scared that Valtteri was going to show up into the pits and that just because typical Mercedes, he would have a slow stop because apparently whenever they have a slow stop, it's always on Bottas's car, and uh, it was and that puncture moment with Giovinazzi was really funny because
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going on, and I saw people run into the garage to go find new tires, and I was like, what is going on right now?
They
And it
said they
was
maybe brought Kimmy's set out. Like nobody knew what was going on at the beginning until we found out it was a punctured tire.
yes, they punctured the tires. Someone's getting fired after that. Poor guy. But yeah, pit stops made all the difference, especially I with two stop strategy, one stop strategy. We saw which one ended up winning. But with that being said, what is your most dramatic moment of the race?
I really like this moment. And I like this moment for a lot of reasons. But it was when Lewis Hamilton was making his charge and he came to Bottas's car, and there was, some may say, a fight. Some may say he let him pass. Some may say Lewis had to work for that overtake. When there was team orders for Bottas to not hold up Lewis Hamilton. And I found that moment dramatic because it was so interesting just to think about what's going on in that Mercedes garage, and more specifically on the finish side of the garage. It was, to me, that was very dramatic, and it kind of lets the fans, it lets the people who are curious into, the minds of the Mercedes executives and into the mind of Valtteri Bottas actually. Um, like we highlighted in the driver episode, you said that Valtteri before the season was going to be more selfish in terms of gunning for the championship, in terms of gunning for race wins. And I think we saw him be a little too selfish today, especially because tire strategy was so highly emphasized and so important in a race like we saw today, that I think that he was a little too selfish in terms of his racing style. And I think that that was just emphasized in that interaction, in that little debacle with Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you talked about being selfish because that's exactly what I was gonna bring up in response to that was it didn't work. He
No,
tried to be selfish and it didn't work. I mean, I'm I don't know what's going on. He's supposed to be on another level. He's supposed to be a different man. And what happened? He still ended up being in third place because I don't know. Apparently that's where he's supposed to be until watch as we show up to Monaco and he ends up like winning by 30 seconds. But
look, I really thought he was going to win this weekend. Before the weekend, I texted Jonah. I think it was on Thursday or Friday, and I said, "That's it. It's Valtteri's weekend." I told him, I said he's going to be P1. He's going to qualify in P1, and I think he's going to win. That's what I said. And unfortunately, I was wrong. But I did think it was Valtteri's time to shine. Lewis had won twice. Max had won once. I thought Valtteri was due for a win. I thought Valtteri was due for the race strategy to favor him, maybe. I thought that he would have the fire because Lewis had already won twice, and he's more of an earlier in the season type of winner. We saw him win in Austria last year, the first race of the season. he normally shines at the beginning of the season, so I thought it was his time to shine. I thought that he really had that fire in him and that this win would have maybe given him a big confidence boost. But we didn't see that. He was in third place. He had he had maybe there was maybe possibility there for him to catch up to Max at one point. That we heard on the radio that he had the pace to catch him up on the final laps. So I was hoping for that, but that didn't end up happening. And he ended up playing a more of a selfish uh, strategy in his own mind, which was to his detriment.
Yeah, I mean, figure it out, please, Valtteri.
Yeah. Jonah,
um,
which point do you want to highlight for your most entertaining moment?
I no, my entertaining moment was the battle for 10th. My
The
most
most dramatic moment,
my
my bad.
most dramatic moment was after. So for those who did not watch the race, Lewis Hamilton decided to pit twice, and Max Verstappen decided to pit once, which meant that Lewis Hamilton had 22 seconds to catch up to Verstappen to end up winning. And my most dramatic moment was watching throughout that entire time, seeing how each lap he ended up shaving 1 second, 1.2 seconds, 1.5 seconds. At one point, he ended up shaving off 2 seconds a lap. And seeing him, seeing that gap between Hamilton and Verstappen get smaller and smaller was my most dramatic moment, because I figured, I was listening to the Red Bull strategy team and they said, don't worry, he's going to catch up at the last lap. But turns out he didn't. He was leading for 12 laps.
Yeah, he caught up with almost 10 laps to go.
Exactly. It was, the man was on a mission, and I, watching that timetable come closer and closer and closer, and him and passing Verstappen with 12 laps left to go was really impressive. And I think seeing everything count down was my most dramatic moment.
Now, let me ask you this question, Jonah, just to respond to this whole strategy question that everybody had in their head while watching the race. Do you think that if Max Verstappen, as he saw the delta go down for Hamilton to catch him, do you think that it would have worked in his favor to perform an undercut at that point, a couple of laps after Hamilton pitted?
I don't know. I
Do you
feel
think it would
like
have worked? Would the undercut have worked?
I feel like it might have, but it's at that point where you need to compare not just the cars but the drivers. And at this point, I still think that Lewis Hamilton is a better driver than Max Verstappen. And regardless of if he had pitted or not, that Lewis Hamilton will always find a way to get it done. Regardless of the circumstances, even with an undercut, I think that Lewis Hamilton still would have won in hindsight.
Yeah, it's he's just the greatest of all time for a reason.
Yeah. With that being said, what was your most surprising moment of the race?
Uh, my most surprising moment of the race is kind of what we just spoke about. We spoke about maybe if Max performed an undercut, he would have caught up to Lewis or they would have been even more competitive. I think that my most surprising moment was Red Bull's strategy not to follow Mercedes' strategy and perform that undercut as they saw as the laps were going by, Hamilton shaving off seconds, as you said, 1 second, 1.2, 1.5. My surprising moment was seeing Red Bull not respond in that way. Not assess situation. Okay, tires are wearing out. Maybe he's managing them properly, but at the same time, use tires, shave off time, and Hamilton's gaining time. So my biggest surprise of the race was not seeing Red Bull go in for the pit and stop and put him a fresh set of mediums to the end of the race so that he could have some tires that would give him a bit more grip, a bit more speed. And that was my most surprising moment.
Notice how last week, my most surprising moment was about the Red Bull strategy team. And now this week, your
It's
most
mine.
surprising moment is about the Red Bull strategy team because we've seen some really questionable decisions from Red Bull's strategy team over the last few races. And I feel like the logic is that they are acting as if they're the smarter person until you realize that Mercedes is just calling their bluff and they have the master plan of all master plans that works every single time. And it's the second race in a row where Red Bull has been looking like losers basically, and it sucks because they finished P2 and P5, but that's besides the point. They got completely beat on strategy, even though they thought that their strategy was the best and that they were going to push, and that regardless of if Hamilton pitted or not, he would have caught up at the last lap. What's going on with the Red Bull strategy team in the last few races? I mean, hopefully they end up picking it up because we want an interesting championship, but
Yeah, well,
it's not working.
look, when we talk about last week's race, we're talking about Sergio Perez going the distance with those medium tires, and eventually at one point leading the race, and Red Bull not calling him in earlier to pit so he could have fresher set of tires because we knew he wasn't sustainably running in first. However, I do think that last week's race was a bit different, and I'll tell you why. Last week, they were betting that there would be a safety car. And for those who don't know, when you pit under a safety car, it's kind of like a free pit stop where the chances of you getting overtaken are much less. Because the second you get out of the pit lane, you cannot be overtaken. And so at a circuit like the Algarve circuit in Portugal, a safety car is much more likely. There are collisions that are more likely to happen at a twisty, windy circuit that we saw last week, whereas at Catalunya, it's not an overtaking circuit, and therefore less collisions are likely to happen. And we saw the only safety car today was when Yuki Tsunoda's engine failed and he had to just pull over. There weren't any collisions, or we only saw one runoff situation with Lance Stroll, as you mentioned before. So I think the last week's race is different because you're betting on a safety car and the chances of a safety car are more likely. Whereas this week, I thought it was a little bit more ridiculous because maybe in Red Bull's mind, they thought there would be a safety car, but the chances of that happening were less, and therefore it didn't work in their favor, and the tires just kept, degrading. You know, they thought it was going to be in the last lap, but ended up being 9 laps, 10 laps before.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is very different, but also I don't think that any strategy team should be basing their strategy on the possibility of a safety car. I think that there should be a plan B for if there's a safety car, but you shouldn't count on okay, where there's probably going to be a safety car around lap 50 something, because if it doesn't, you're going to end up like Max Verstappen in this race, or you're going to end up like Sergio Perez in the last race. And I think that they just need to pick it up on the strategy time because they keep on getting blown out by Mercedes race after race. Um,
Yeah, and but that's what they're talking about on the broadcast. They're constantly saying the Red Bull drivers are out, and they're saying, "Oh, this would work if there'd be a safety car. Oh, if there's a safety car right now, this would favor Sergio Perez. This would favor Max Verstappen." And so that's what comes into my head when I'm thinking, "Wow, why are they out? Why are they out? Maybe Christian Horner is rolling the dice, and he's telling himself this will work if there is a safety car. But the chances of there being a safety car in Catalunya, we were close to not having one today.
yeah,
Chances,
exactly.
the chance of there being a safety car in Catalunya are little to none. So that's why I think it was very surprising that they, rolled the dice, put all their chips on the table for those set of tires, and the dividends didn't pay. But Jonah, you tell me, what do you think was the most surprising moment?
All right, welcome to the second week in a row where I end up talking about Valtteri Bottas. um, My most surprising moment was Valtteri Bottas getting held up by Charles Leclerc for like half of the race. um, I know that our opinions on Valtteri Bottas are very, very different, but come on, even at a track where it's difficult to overtake, you are in a Mercedes. You are in the car that has won the last 7 constructors championships and 7 drivers championships in a next to a Ferrari who we're lucky is even out of the midfield. Uh I don't under and on top of that, Leclerc was closing the gap, well, was widening the gap, sorry, between him, Bottas, and Verstappen because he was lapping at 2 seconds a lap slower than Verstappen and Hamilton. It's it makes no sense that some that an underpowered car, an underpowered Ferrari, could manage to hold off a world championship winning car for the last 7 years, and even at a track like Barcelona, we've seen overtakes happening. It's called turn one. It's called it's basically you could overtake at turn one, but Charles Leclerc showed that he could fight off a Mercedes, and it's just such a fail on Valtteri Bottas's part that he didn't manage to pass him at any point because that ruined his chances of winning. I don't care what it takes, whether it's go on the outside, whether it's screw your tire strategy up and just pit twice, but pit earlier. Find a way to make it work if you want to win. And he with this whole thing of him being selfish, he managed to get held up by a Ferrari, and I don't think that should have happened this race.
So this is where we disagree because I don't think that speaks to Valtteri Bottas's failures in the car. I think it speaks to Charles Leclerc's greatness in his car because we know, and we've mentioned this so many times on this episode, that overtaking is near impossible. And we saw even with DRS, Valtteri Bottas's car was not the only one that required multiple DRS uh, attempts to get close to the car in front of them. So I really think that just speaks to Charles Leclerc's ability to push that car to the limit and not to Valtteri Bottas's ability to overtake, because this track is really one of the unique ones on the calendar where overtaking is near impossible. And yeah, I think that the overtake that Charles Leclerc did initially to get past him speaks to his lack of attention or to his lack of awareness uh, in the first lap, which is unfortunate to see because he was clearly, as the Brits like to say, napping. He was clearly sleeping and not paid and didn't pay attention. So yes, maybe that will speak to his failure, but I think that the fact that he was behind for the first couple of laps or until he pitted actually doesn't speak to his failure. I think that it just speaks more to Charles Leclerc's greatness.
Could we come to a compromise and say that it was halfway Leclerc's brilliance and halfway Bottas's failures?
Sure, we could say that. Maybe he could
Okay.
have could have gotten closer on turn one. I'll say.
I I I I feel so bad at the same time picking on Valtteri Bottas, but at the same time he's giving me so much material.
He's he's a talented driver. He just needs to regain his confidence because he already has the poise, he already has the composure. He just needs to regain his confidence. And I don't even think a race. I think a race win would do it, but not only that, I think maybe even a second place would do it. I
Yeah,
think if he just doesn't finish in third behind Verstappen, we can make a world of a difference in his head and can propel him to new heights. I think he just
exactly.
needs a
We've
boost of
had
confidence. I think he needs to be selfish at the appropriate times. And when he realizes those times, I think we could see a new Valtteri Bottas, to be honest with you.
he's
And
picking the wrong times to be selfish.
yeah,
It's hurting
and I
him.
really think that he should have, done like Daniel Ricciardo did in Imola. He should have let his teammate pass. Clearly had the better pace, clearly the more chance of winning, and I think that as the races go by, I think we're going to see a more mature Valtteri Bottas, because as we both know, the rumors are real. Russell is on the come up. Russell Bottas is the one that's being spoken about to lose that seat, and I know that the clock is ticking, and I know Valtteri Bottas knows it, and I think that he's going to learn as the races go by to be more poised, have a better composure, and he already has great poise and composure, but just have the right level of confidence and the right level of aggressiveness to fully utilize that Mercedes car to prove himself for the seat in 2022.
I disagree with you. I think that Valtteri is going to get angrier, and because of that, he's going to make more mistakes.
Well, look, I think that if he stays on the same course as finishing in P3 behind Verstappen, out of the podium places, DNFing like an Imola, I think in that case, yes, that's a reality. However, I think that if he does have a weekend in Monaco, or he does have a weekend in Baku, where he has the reputation of performing well on that street circuit, if he has a good weekend in those two Grand Prix, his confidence could be on the come up. He can rise to new levels as a result.
I will be very, very intrigued to see that happening. And
I'm hoping
in a few races.
I'm hoping for it. I'm optimistic. But if he does continue on the same path, I do see Russell having that seat. But as of now, I think that it's very, very much up for grabs. And I think that Bottas has just as much of a chance as Russell does. If not more.
I am not going to be happy if in 2 weeks from now or in 3 weeks from now, Valtteri Bottas ends up winning like 2 out of the next 3 races. And everything that I've said up to this point is going to be entirely nullified. But
I guess we'll have to wait and see, Jonah. But this was a great race review, a great episode.
Yep.
And you like to remind the listeners of something special.
Yeah, of course. So first off, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there. And thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure to like our Facebook page, follow our Instagram at JJF1, and we will see you at the next episode. See ya.
See ya.